Minister, I want to ask you what my question number 38 and 43, take them together, to ask you your opinion on the disadvantage to people who are applying for TUS or CE schemes who are randomly selected by JobPath at the same time or in around the same time they're offered the CE scheme or a TUS position, and are blocked by the private operators who run JobPath from taking up those positions. Could you respond to what you think is in the best interests of the job seeker?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I should just say many CE schemes are private companies as well, so I'm not quite sure what that reference is. The activation supports and services which are available to those who are long-term unemployed include the JobPath Employment Activation Service and Work Experience and training schemes such as Community Employment and TUS. The JobPath service, procured by my department, provides additional resources to enable it to provide a high-quality, case-managed employment service for people who are long-term unemployed and those most at risk of becoming long-term unemployed. The companies contracted to provide the JobPath service have no role or authority when it comes to referrals or placements or to any other activation schemes or programmes such as CE. The aim of the JobPath service, which is provided for job seekers only, is to assist them in finding sustainable full-time paid employment by providing intensive individual support and assistance. It's distinct from community employment, which provides part-time employment and training opportunities in local communities as a stepping stone back to employment for people on a range of social welfare payments, including those on long-term unemployment payments. I should emphasise that community employment does not, nor is it intended to, provide full-time sustainable employment. Job seekers can only participate on one activation scheme or service at a time. This is to ensure that the best use is made of the available places and to allow the scheme and service providers time to work with the participants. However, people who on the date of their referral to JobPath have a written offer with a start date within 4 weeks for CE or TUS will be facilitated to take up that placement rather than going on JobPath. A referral period for JobPath services is typically for a year, and at the end of those 52 weeks, job seekers who haven't been successful in finding suitable employment may, subject to an assessment by an intro case officer, apply for other activation support such as CE or TUS.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to take issue with the question of how we see employment schemes, because you have said previously, and I quote you here, that where am I now? That job schemes are not necessarily proper employment. Now, I want to refute that, because many CE schemes and employment in TUS schemes are actually very valuable employment in the community. TUS schemes provide short-term quality work opportunities. They're not just training, and you're not just sitting on your hands and having a great time. You're actually engaged in things like environmental services, caring services, community services, heritage and cultural services, para-educational services, to describe what TUS stands for. Now, really what I'm getting at here is, I have a letter here about a constituent of mine from your department, from an official in your department in Entrio, who randomly selected, the constituent was randomly selected for a TUS initiative in November, interviewed for TUS placement for January and placed on a panel. He was interviewed again in January for a placement with a host company and Garda vetted. And then he was randomly selected for JobPath prior to taking up the TUS placement. So I got in touch with Entrio. The official got in touch with the JobPath Central to inquire if the selection for JobPath could be deferred to allow this individual to take up the TUS offer, and he was told no, that this couldn't happen and that JobPath would not defer the offer. And that is not the only one. I've had many cases of this. I think it needs to be investigated, because I think what you have is a private company interfering with the services being delivered by your department and interfering.
Yeah, just to say, CE and TUS, in my view, don't constitute regular employment. That's not to say they aren't valuable. They're very valuable, and I have loads in my constituency too, and I know their value. And of course, it does involve a lot of real work. But it's a different thing to say it's regular employment. It's not. It's an employment activation scheme where the state provides a form of employment for somebody on a part-time basis. And I do know your own party has been critical of the live register figures and the unemployment stats produced by the government on the basis that it doesn't include people who are on CE and TUS. So even in your own party, there must be a view that it's not regular employment. And what we don't want people doing, to answer the other part of your question, is chopping and changing between services and schemes. That doesn't work for us administratively. It's not the right way to approach labour activation. If somebody's on a scheme or with a service, they should stick with that and not change to another one until they're completed with it. But what we do say is that where somebody has a start date within 4 weeks with C or TUS, they can take that up, even if they're referred to JobPath.
Extraordinary situation that an official employed in your department who makes a recommendation that somebody be allowed to take up a scheme, and that decision, in the best interest of the individual, and that decision of an employee of your department, official of your department, is overridden by a private company such as CTEC, who do receive remuneration for taking people onto JobPath, and they have vested interest in keeping people on JobPath because they get payment for it. They get a registration payment for taking a person onto it, and then they get 4 retrospective payments if they keep them in a job for a longer period of time. So they have a financial incentive to keep an individual, and more than just an individual, but lots of people on JobPath, where your department was looking, in this case and in many other cases, at the best interests of the individual. And I'm talking about somebody who's a bit older, maybe in their 50s or so, who doesn't always suit them to sit around waiting for interviews that JobPath might send them for, and God knows what kind of jobs. Here is a valuable local community role they could be playing, and your department has been overridden by a private company who has vested interests.
The Minister said not to be sending people to different services or people utilising different services in order to get a job. One of the things we've noticed on the north side is that the local job service of our partnership seems to be used less and less by your department, Minister. You seem to prefer the route through CTEC and a much more inflexible route. The local job service obviously would particularly know about local opportunities, not just in CE and other job activation schemes, but in the wider economy of the north side. So I'm not sure if you find that yourself with the partnership in Blanche and in Fingal, but that's certainly an experience I think that we have had.
Yeah, just to clarify, the referrals are made by my department and only by my department through the department centrally and also the intra-centres. And the rules are also made by my department. And the rules are that you can't move from one scheme to another or from one service to another. But if you have a start date within 4 weeks for Gateway, or sorry, not for Gateway, for TUS or CE, you can then take that up. The position I suppose we'd like to move to, and this is still in transition, is that people who are unemployed would go through JobPath first. And if they're unable to secure employment on their own or with the assistance of JobPath, after that, they would then become eligible for CE and TUS, and that's kind of what we're moving towards. But obviously there's a transition piece now underway.
Question 39, Deputy Pringle is not present. Question 40 is to be taken with question 44. Deputy Brid Smith to introduce. Question 40.
Sorry, 1 second. This is for Gino Kenny's
40
question.
and 44.
Oh, yeah. We're going back to the pensions again, Minister, and the homemaker scheme. So I want to ask you again, the report on the changes that you promised when we were putting an amendment to the social welfare bill. You promised you'd issue a report within 6 months on the question of the social protection in the homemakers credit, and I'd like you to issue a statement on the matter. I know it's not 6 months up, but you're coming under a lot of scrutiny and pressure on this one because an awful lot of people are falling into the situation that was described earlier by other deputies of being discriminated, deliberately discriminated against in their pension.
Thank you.
And if you would
Deputy.
comment.
Minister.
The state pension is a very valuable benefit and is the bedrock of the Irish state pension system, or the Irish pension system as a whole. There are two state pensions. Firstly, the state pension non-contributory, which is a means-tested pension and is funded by general taxation. Secondly, the state pension contributory is not means-tested and is paid from the Social Insurance Fund. Therefore, it's important to ensure that those qualifying have made a sustained contribution to the Social Insurance Fund over their working lives. To ensure that an individual can maximise their entitlement to a state pension, all contributions paid or credited over their working life from when they first enter insurable employment until pension age are taken into account when assessing their entitlement and the level of that entitlement. The current homemaker scheme makes qualification for a higher rate of the state pension contributory easier for those who take time out of the workforce for caring duties. The scheme, which was introduced and took effect for the periods from 1994, allows up to 20 years spent caring for children under 12 years of age or caring for incapacitated people over that age to be disregarded when a person's social insurance record is being averaged for pension purposes, subject to the standard qualifying conditions for the state pension contributory also being satisfied. This is the effect of increasing the yearly average of the pensioner, which is used to set the rate of their pension. I believe the Deputy's references in this question relate to a statement I made in the course of the recent Social Welfare Bill, that the issue of the homemaker's credit would be considered in the context of the total contributions approach reforms which we are planning. I expect a final paper to be available in the middle of the year, following the receipt of data from the independent actuarial review of the Social Insurance Fund, which will be used to cost options in this reform. My department has estimated that the cost of extending the homemaker scheme to allow people to avail of the full 20 years currently allowed under the scheme, encompassing periods prior to 1994, could cost some €290 million in 2017, and this figure would rise at a faster rate than the overall cost of the state pension. Such funds are not currently available to implement this measure. Where someone doesn't qualify for a full-rate contributory pension, they may qualify for an alternative payment. If their spouse has a contributory pension, they may qualify for an increase for a qualified adult in IQA, amounting to up to 90% of a full-rate pension. Alternatively, they may qualify for a means-tested state pension non-contributory, which amounts up to 95% of the maximum contributory rate.
For me. Yeah, just want to comment. This morning when Deputy Tommy Brewin queried the Taoiseach, and I know you're possibly the future Taoiseach, but he did query the existing Taoiseach on this, and he answered by saying that some people did suffer badly under the austerity measures, and we would hope that we could give them some alleviation in the future. I argue that this is pure out-and-out discrimination on two grounds: discrimination against women on one grounds and discrimination on the grounds of age. Now, we have equality legislation that lists 11 grounds on which you cannot discriminate against people in this society, and two of those grounds are gender and age. And this government is guilty on both counts of discriminating through this pension scheme. Now, to me, it seems quite a simple question that a leader like the current Taoiseach, or possibly use the future Taoiseach, needs to grab this by the throat and deal with it, because you and your government are breaking the equality legislation. You are the lawbreakers, not the pensioners who are being discriminated against.
Gomi the Reagan Ishkadi and Cade Piscano Ella Shishin over Raha at our Ronaha, Agashin Cade over na over on Chachta Michael Healy Ray, Agashin Ashna, Igor on Park na Shunta Ikunda Kiri Resources for the National Park